Hello everybody, welcome to the Daily Sip. My name is Oliver. My mission is to bring you closer to organic Japanese green tea, and today we're going to dive into the next session of our mega sampler review. And today what we're going to dive into is actually two different matchas. So on the one hand we have the Noike matcha, which we're going to have a look into, and on the other hand we have the Matcha Washimine. So it's this one here. Here, Mr. Nakai is the farmer of this tea here from the region of Wazuka, and we actually have the Noike matcha, which is also from Wazuka, so the same region. And there's another thing which is quite interesting. They are both from Okumidori cultivars, but two different farmers, a little bit of a distance from each other, I would say. Like 2 kilometers away from each other, so in the same region, in the same area also of plantation of the matcha. And we're gonna dive into the same cultivar from two different farmers and see what the taste difference is like. Definitely there's a price difference between these two. Meanwhile, the Matcha Washimine is for 40 grams $45. The Noike matcha is only $29 for 50 grams. So quite a price difference, and I want to see what is actually the difference between these two when we hop into the taste of the matcha. But before we go into what actually the difference is of these two matchas, some of you might not even be aware or be familiar with matcha. So let's have a look into what is actually matcha and what are the leaves used for it.
Matcha is a very popular powdered green tea from Japan. This tea is made by grinding the leaves of the tea plant into a fine powder. But these aren't just any tea leaves. These leaves have been shaded in order to improve their sweet and savory flavors. They also have their stems removed to improve the flavor even further. Finally, they are ground in a large stone mill. This process takes approximately 1 hour to produce just 50 grams of precious matcha powder.
So now that we have seen that what matcha is actually made of, now we can go a step further. And when we talk about matcha, matcha is everybody has, I think, after this video, definitely after you have seen this part here. So now you know what matcha is. A lot of people know it from the latte. Matcha latte is something which is quite common. So I wanted to dive into a little bit more into how the differences in matcha is, especially when we talk about culinary versus ceremonial grade, because we're gonna talk about ceremonial grade, but most often this is something which is not very well known. So ceremonial grade is not only linked to the tea ceremony, but it is also linked often to higher grade or upper scale matcha powder, and these two both are ceremonial grade. So let's have a look at what actually the difference is between ceremonial grade matcha and so-called culinary grade matcha.
This is ceremonial grade matcha. While low-quality matcha powder is often sold online, true high-quality matcha is in a category of its own. This is the type of matcha used in the Japanese tea ceremony and is carefully produced to ensure a smooth and sweet taste. First, the tea plant is shaded for 3 weeks prior to the harvest. Then the youngest and sweetest leaves of the tea plant are picked, and then they have their stems removed to improve the flavor. The leaves are then ground in a large stone mill to produce a fine green powder. This powder is then mixed into a bowl of warm water to produce a very special tea.
So now that we know what ceremonial grade matcha actually is, now we can go really in the differences between these two tea, and that's the main object of this video. So today we're gonna dive into the difference of these two. Good. So before we do this, let's put up the light a little bit more. Voila, good. So now the lighting is also better. So here we open up the matcha from Mr. Nakai. So Mr. Nakai is quite known to be one of the bigger farmers in Japan of organic matcha, but definitely he is one of the biggest in the region of Wazuka, where he's situated. And now we're just gonna have a look at this matcha he's producing. So his father was one also, what he told us at least, is that his father was one of the founders of the organic label in Japan, the so-called JAS label. This is when you go to Japan, often you see a JAS sign on the tea pack when you talk about Yuki, Ocha, or just so-called organic tea. So this is the reason we also got to know him, because he was quite a known, or he is a known farmer around the region for his organic plantation. And Noike, actually, he's an organic farmer, but he's not certified. Noike, we also got to know him, very, very fine man. He's pretty young, he's around 35, or he was at the time 35, now he's around 38 years old. And actually, he studied engineering in close to Wazuka in the region of Kyoto. And then he decided to become a farmer, because during the summertime he often went to farming or help farming other farmers. And then now he has 1 hectare of actually he has 1 hectare of tea. He's trying to grow his fields, so acquiring some new ones, but at the moment he's a very small farmer. And he actually then suggested us to try also his new Okumidori matcha, and that's how we got into his tea. But let's have a look at the teas themselves. So there should be no real big difference. So this is the Okumidori matcha from Mr. Nakai, and this is the Okumidori matcha from Noike. We can see a very slight color difference. The Noike matcha seems a little bit more pale. When we just look at this of these two matchas, is that I would assume that the Noike matcha is slightly more astringent than the matcha of Mr. Nakai. So Washimine versus Noike matcha could be a little bit better in terms of sweetness. But now let's go into it. And before I dive into the taste, I want to tell you a little bit about the tastes of, or how Okumidori kind of was invented. So Okumidori in itself is not a very well-known cultivar. The main problem, I guess, of Okumidori is because it's smooth, it's sweet, it's round, but it is a late budding cultivar. And often in Japan, and when you go on the kind of traditions of a Japanese green tea, is that people want to have a very fresh and as soon as possible their tea. So the Shincha season might be something you have heard of. The Shincha just means the first budding tea or the first tea, and this is actually harvested very early, and the goal is who can be the fastest to be with the consumer. So meaning that the consumers were willing to pay quite a high price on the Shincha tea. So when you're already a late budding cultivar, then you definitely have already disadvantages being on the market later. So that's why I guess also Okumidori is not so much known, but for me Okumidori is a very nice cultivar because actually it is very sweet, it is very smooth, and this is something especially we in the West are looking for. So, but before we dive into the taste, we have to prepare the matchas. So I already water soaked my chasen, so the bamboo whisk, and then I have also the chachaku and my chawan, so my tea bowl, and I take around 2 grams of the tea. And important is that we sift it. So we'll do now both matchas at the same time, or one after the other, and then I can taste them similarly. So you see that I just sift it through. It's very fast done. Some seconds, everything is sifted through. I suggest you to do that just to not have any crumbs, any small pieces, which can be then, or can lead to kind of a not so smooth and not so fine texture. Then chasen in, and just with the W form you can mix your matcha. Good is about Okumidori, it is quite high in theanine, quite high in its amino acid, especially when it's shaded, which drives even further the amount of amino acids, and you can see that there builds a very nice foam. And when I pour it into the glass, then you can see how beautiful this foam is. So that's a nice smooth matcha. Good. Then I'm gonna wash it a little bit just to give a fair chance to both of them. Good. Et voila. Very well. And now number 2. we're gonna sift it also, same amount of matcha. Just gonna sift it. So this is now Mr. Noike matcha. Good, this also done some seconds and we're through. So here we're done, just put this together and then we're gonna add some water and then whisk it. Same procedure. Also beautiful W form. Et voila. Good, and now very easy, and also the beautiful foam you can see also created with this Okumidori matcha. So by now no real difference between the two matchas. Good, this is done. And do we use the same amount of water? Yeah, we're pretty close. I think Miss Nakai is a little bit more, so we're gonna add a little bit to the Noike matcha, just that we are at the same level. Et voila. So we're done. We're just gonna mix here. We have a really similar tasting of both. So we can see beautiful color of both matchas. So here we have the Noike matcha and here we have the matcha of Mr. Nakai, and we have the same amount of powder and the same amount of water. So now let's dive into the tasting of these two teas. Let's start with one of Mr. Nakai. What you can see, there's a very slight difference also in the foam. Here the matcha of Mr. Nakai is a little bit more green, a little bit darker, and here you have a little bit of a whiter foam. So still, my theory is that we have Mr. Noike, this one here is a little bit, might be a little bit more stringent than the one from Mr. Nakai, but now let's dive into the tasting to really compare. So, Mr. Nakai, Matcha Washimine. Smooth, sweet, round. There's a smaller stringency in the end, so it's not a pure sweet cultivar. Sometimes when you really want to have only a sweet, often these are the Ceremonial cultivars, but still the Okumidori have very beautiful kind of sweet notes to it, and there's a slight, very small and fine astringency to it. I get a edamame, I get a little bit of a nutty note as well with this one here. But it's kind of really about this edamame, a little bit of freshness as well to the tea. So quite an interesting matcha in terms of kind of the sweet note it brings to it, but it is not too strong in its fruity notes, not too strong in banana peel, just a nice sweet roundness. And if I have to give it kind of a smoother or kind of a fruity note, it goes quite a lot in the direction of peach. So stone fruit, peach in this direction. But not kind of sugary notes, not sweet sugary note, but really smooth. And I get a little bit of smoothness. It's not the taste of banana shake, which I get, but kind of the smoothness which the banana, sometimes when you do it in a latte, gives a certain smoothness to it. This is what I get as well, a little bit from the Okumidori. So it gives a little bit of the thicker, a little bit more dense texture to the water without being kind of overly sugary, overly sweet, but going a little bit in the direction of a peach flavor profile. Good. Now let's go to the Noike matcha. Here also very smooth, very sweet. And if in the aftermath I get a little bit kind of the aftertaste is much more bringing this astringency. So what's quite interesting is at the Noike matcha in the beginning it's very smooth and round. It seems a little bit smoother in the beginning than the Matcha Washimine, but then somehow it turns a little bit, or it gives a little bit more space to astringent note, and it's kind of a more, it leaves a more of a bitter note in the aftertaste of your palate. So it starts very smooth, very sweet, very round. Then do I get also it drifts a little bit more, a little bit less of in kind of a smooth sweetness of the stone fruit, of the peach, which I got before. Here I got much more a little bit of the, for me papaya for example has a little bit less of this typical sweet round notes of a fruit, but it has a little bit of a heavier, nearly a little bit of a earthy tones, which are in the taste of the papaya, and this is what I get more. So here I have a much more earthier, still sweet, but with a kind of a earthy undertone of the matcha. And especially the aftertaste is a little bit more astringent, so it confirms. So here I'm much sweeter. I'm a little bit lighter, while with the Noike matcha I get a little bit more of earthier undertones. It seems a little bit heavier in terms of its taste profile, and in the end the astringency is pronounced a little bit stronger. So definitely price-wise there is quite a difference between these two tea. If we are here at around a little bit more than $1 per grams, here we are around 80 cents per grams. So there is a difference between these two in terms of pricing, but here I got much more kind of this lighter smoothness drifting up into stone fruit peachy flavor. Here I got a little bit more of a, maybe more of a full body kind of a stronger texture of the matcha tea, but this brings with it a little bit more of lower tones, a little bit of earthier, more maybe a little bit of more wooden tones with it as well. So it seems a little bit of a heavier, but both of these matchas are, in terms of taste, are for me very satisfying. I definitely prefer the Washimine a little bit more, due to the fact that here in the aftertaste you have quite a little bit of astringency which stays in your palate. But if you don't mind to have any a little bit of the astringency, it's not very strong, but if you don't mind to have a little bit, then absolutely the Noike matcha can also be something for you. Good. This was this. Thanks a lot for watching. These are the two matchas, Noike matcha and Washimine, both in our mega sampler experience. So if you ever want to leave a comment, ask us any question, please feel free to do so in the comments or on Instagram, DMs, wherever you would like to get in touch with us. And I hope you like this one. See you and bye bye.